The wind had shifted. You could smell the river from their cottage, which meant the weather would turn by nightfall. Taran stirred in the bed, eyes half-lidded, the fever still clinging to his skin like wet cloth. The fire crackled beside him, and for a moment he felt weightless, warm, held somewhere between dreams and breath. Ira stood by the hearth, placing a small iron kettle onto the hook. Her back was to him, and her hair was braided in a way he hadn't seen since before the war. She always braided it when they were expecting guests. But they weren't expecting anyone. "You're up," she said softly, without turning. "Good." He pushed himself up, groaning from the effort. "You made tea?" "It's mint," she said, turning to him now with that small smile of hers. "Good for fever." "I'm fine." "You're not." "I've been through worse," Taran muttered, trying to swing his legs off the bed. "You haven't seen each other in nearly 2 years." "I know." He hesitated, then added with a faint smile. "He always hated seeing me laid up. Used to say it made him feel smaller." She returned the smile. "He looks up to you, you know. God knows why. He's the one who built something." Taran leaned back into the pillow, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. "Always had a big mind. Bigger than anyone in country." Ira said nothing to that. Then, after a beat, "I'll go in your place," she said, already rising, wiping her hands on her apron. "You need rest, and Cale shouldn't feel ignored. Someone should be there." Taran hesitated. Every part of him said no. But the fever pulled at his limbs, and the comfort of the bed, of her touch, was too warm, too soft, too far. "All right," he said finally. "But don't let him talk your ear off about his visions." Ira smiled. "You know I've always liked listening to him." He chuckled. "That's your worst flaw." She leaned in and kissed his forehead. "Sleep, soldier." And then she was gone. When it's at sea, the city still smelled of ash. From the high balcony, Cale watched the lines at the outer gates. Families huddled under cloaks, carts filled with splintered wood and broken boots. Soldiers limped beside them, too wounded to return to duty, too proud to beg. Somewhere beyond the eastern hills, the last of the plague fires were still burning. Behind him, a brazier crackled. The warmth touched the stone walls, but not him. He held the book in both hands like something sacred. Thin parchment, bound in dark hide. No title, no author. Just symbols that had taken him months to decipher with the help of a dying monk. He turned a page. Blood of kin, willing hands, fire before the moon's fall, sacrifice and sanctum. He closed it gently. "They'll die," he said aloud to no one. A cough echoed in the corridor behind him. His steward, old, gaunt, ever silent, waited in the doorway, saying nothing. Cale didn't turn. "Take them to the chamber. I'll follow." The steward bowed. "My lord." As he watched their bodies being carried away, his mother's hands still curled slightly, Ira's braid falling loose, Cale whispered under his breath, "Forgive me." The door was older than the fortress itself, carved from black oak, bound in iron, sealed for years behind layers of stone and silence. Now it stood before Cale like a final judgment. His hands trembled at his sides and sweat clung to his back despite the cold. The corridor was empty, lit only by a single torch behind him. The flame guttered, as if uneasy in the air. He knelt. Not for show or for doctrine. Just a man begging. Cale lowered his head to the stone and spoke softly, like a child at confession. "Forgive me." No answer. Just the sound of his breath against the silence. "I have tried. I have bargained. I've given gold, blood, time, sleep. I've pleaded with the crown, shared grain with enemies, healed men who murdered my own. It's never enough." He pressed a fist against his chest. "They die anyway, starving, coughing in the streets, gnawing on bones while lords toast to peace." His voice cracked. "I watched mothers bury sons, and sons turn to thieves, and fathers drink themselves to ruin. I watched the war break us." His eyes closed. "I would trade myself if that were the price. I swear it. I would die 1,000 times over if it would save them." A long silence. Then, "But I can't let them keep suffering just because I'm afraid of the cost." He stood slowly and opened the chamber door. "Wendy, Bjorna, by your time." The air changed the moment he stepped inside. Colder, heavier, as if the stone remembered what it had seen before. The altar waited in the center, draped in linen and shadow. 3 bodies, his mother, his father, Era. They looked as if they might wake at any moment. Cale's jaw clenched. He walked to the pedestal and opened the old book. The leather creaked in his grip. The ink was dark and dense, coiling across the page in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. He looked at them one last time and whispered, not to them, but to something beyond. "Let this be the last time." He began to chant. The words fell from his tongue like they had always lived there. The torchlight twisted, shadows crawling along the stone. He picked up the dagger, cold as frostbite. To his father first, swift and clean. Then his mother. He paused longer this time. His breath caught in his throat. But the blade found its mark. Then, Era. He stood over her, frozen. "I'm sorry," he said. "You were never meant for this. Not you." His hand trembled. He steadied it, and with a final breath, he drove the dagger into her heart. The moment stretched. The flame dimmed. A pulse of green light washed through the chamber. Far above them, deep in the foundation of the city, something rumbled. Cale stood alone. The ritual was complete. The month after he left the citadel passed like rot spreading under skin. Slow, unseen at first, but fatal in its certainty. Taran drifted through it in a haze of grief and liquor. Most nights ended in fists. Some began that way too. He earned a reputation, the war hero who came home with ghosts. The kind you couldn't drink away. The kind that wore your wife's face. He became a fixture in the taverns. Always with a mug in hand. Always with a stare just a bit too distant. The regulars learned to leave him be unless they wanted their teeth loosened. He wasn't cruel, just volatile. He'd be calm one minute, then smashing a table the next, his knuckles already bloodied from yesterday. No one mentioned her. Not out loud. But sometimes in the quiet he heard murmurs of sympathy, of confusion, of worry, and sometimes of awe. "Did you see what Cale's done with the place? Never thought I'd live to see orchards blooming in plague fields. Say what you will, he made paradise from ash." He shut his ears to it. Or tried. But the city was changing. And Cale with it. What began as whispers spread like fire across the realm. Farmers abandoned their failing lordships to walk barefoot across miles just to reach the gates of Cale's utopia. Merchants rerouted their caravans. Even minor nobles began pledging fealty, one by one, out of fear or faith or both. And somewhere far away, in a great hall of stone and fire, a crown was set upon Cale's head. Not by divine right, but due to pressure, popular support, and desertion of other nobles. Taran didn't see it happen. He didn't see the coronation, the crowds or the oaths, or the way Cale looked in that moment. Taran saw only his own ruin, one drink at a time. Until one night, he sat in his usual corner, a bruise purpling his jaw, nursing something stronger than ale. The tavern was crowded, loud, but he hadn't cared. And then he heard it. "In the name of King Cale," someone shouted, lifting a cup. "Our savior." The words pierced through everything. The laughter, the haze, the hum of pain he wore like a second skin. Taran didn't move, but something shifted in his gut. A slow-turning wheel. Memory and rage stirred together. Era's face, warm and sharp in the firelight, and Cale's voice, calm as the blade he'd used. Her death meant life. His fist tightened around the mug. The man beside him jostled him, sloshing drink across the table. "You all right, old man?" Taran looked at him, and for a second the old fury rose. He could feel the familiar itch in his knuckles, that instinct to lash out, to punish someone, anyone, for the pain clawing in his chest. But he didn't swing. He stood quietly and walked out. The street was cold, the stars above indifferent. He didn't stop walking until he reached the edge of town. He stood there for a while, staring down that road. Then he turned, headed home. The cottage was dark when he stepped in, still full of her. He lit no lamps. For a long while he just sat in the dark. Then he rose, went to the old drawer, and opened it. His fingers touched cold iron, brittle parchment. Dust. He didn't hesitate this time. He took what he needed and left the rest behind. The citadel stood silent under moonlight, its spires and gardens silvered by the hush of midnight. No crowds, no fanfare, no proclamations, just the soft rhythm of wind between columns and the distant hum of fountains. Inside, high above the city he'd built from ash, King Cale sat in the great hall with only his steward and a jug of wine for company. "Strange, isn't it?" Cale mused, reclining halfway across the marble bench that flanked the tall arched window. "You'd think wearing a crown meant more work, but in paradise there's very little to rule." The steward gave a tired chuckle. "You've outlawed hunger, disease, and war, my lord. Not much left to legislate." "Ah, don't tempt fate." Cale grinned, then reached for the goblet and swirled the dark wine inside. "Let's not pretend it governs itself. There's the orchards to manage, the irrigation channels, the new school they're asking for. And don't get me started on the debate about music in the public gardens." He looked out at the city. His city, once a tired fortress, now a wonder that shimmered in the dark like a jewel nestled in the hills. Lights glowed in every home. Not one hearth was cold. Not one child cried from hunger. And yet, he reached slowly up and lifted the crown from his head. Simple, polished iron, no gems, no gilding. A crown made for a world that no longer worshipped excess. He held it in his hands. "They visit me at night," he said quietly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them. Mother, father, Ira." He ran a thumb along the inside rim, where no one else could see the thin crack near the base. "They look the same as they did when I laid them down on the altar." No." A silence passed between them. Then Cale exhaled. "It had to be done," he said, as if repeating a sacred mantra. "Nothing great was ever built without blood." He looked at the crown again, not as a symbol of power but of burden. "Even Christ had to die screaming on a tree to save the world," he said softly. "I gave less than that, and I saved more." The steward shifted uncomfortably. "Some would say the comparison is bold." Cale offered a weary smile. "Some would, but they're not the ones who built heaven with their own hands." Another beat passed, and then a knock echoed through the great hall. Not the timid knock of a messenger, not the rushed knock of a servant. No, this one was slow. Like the man behind it was not in a hurry. The steward moved to answer, but Cale raised a hand. "I'll get it." As he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a ghost. Taran stood there, wrapped in road dust and silence. His face was leaner, his eyes darker, but the grief was gone. Cale stared at him a moment, caught between joy and dread. "Brother, Wingardian." The heavy oak door closed with a whisper. Cale stepped back, searching his brother's face for anything, warmth, anger, anything human. Then he turned to his steward. "Leave us." The man hesitated. "Sir." "I said go." The steward gave a stiff bow and disappeared, leaving only the two brothers alone. Cale approached slowly. "What brings you here, Taran? You've been away a while." Taran glanced toward the open balcony, where the breeze carried the scent of blossoms and the low murmur of a dreaming city. Figured the flames would look better from up here. Cale blinked. The flames. A grin curled across Taran's lips. Then it happened. A deep, bone-rattling boom shook the distant edges of the city. Then another. And another. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The soft hum of peace was replaced with the roar of destruction, thunder not from the sky, but from within. Cale staggered toward the balcony and threw open the doors. From the high terrace, the city burned. Orange fingers clawed up toward the stars. Smoke rose in monstrous towers. Fountains shattered. Glowing embers danced on the wind like fireflies. Screams began to pierce the night air. He stood frozen, mouth slightly open. Then he turned. "What have you done?" Taran didn't speak. "You don't care about the world," Cale said. "Don't pretend you did this for them." Taran finally met his brother's eyes. Cale's voice rose with fury. "You're a selfish, petty. You watch this world burn for the sake of your grief. That's not love. That's evil. You'll burn in hell for this." "I know," Taran said. The words stopped Cale cold. "I know what I did," Taran repeated, quieter now. "I know it was wrong." Cale's mouth opened, but no words came. "I know this place was beautiful," Taran continued. "I saw it. I walked through it. It made me weep. You did what no one else could." His voice faltered like something had caught in his throat. "But you killed her." Cale looked away. "You killed them, and I couldn't let you have it." Silence hung between them. Heavy. "Honest. I told myself I would be better," Taran said, voice barely above a whisper. "That I wouldn't become like you. But the truth is, I already did." Cale turned back to him, searching for something in his brother's face. But there was nothing. Just that quiet, terrible, calm face. "I loved you, Cale," Taran said. "And I still do. But you crossed a line, and I crossed it too to make sure you paid for it." Flames painted the sky in orange and black beyond the citadel windows. Screams bled into silence. "Pick up your sword," Taran said. Cale didn't move. Taran stepped forward and dropped a sword at his feet. "You don't have a choice." "I'm not fighting you," Cale murmured, his voice small. "Not after all this. You've already won." Taran's eyes were empty. "It's not about winning." Cale bent down slowly and picked up the blade. It shook in his grip. The fight was short. Cale was brilliant with strategy, not with a sword. He parried once, twice, then stumbled. Taran didn't hesitate. The steel slid cleanly through his brother's chest. Cale crumpled to the ground. He didn't speak. He just looked up at Taran with something between sorrow and relief as the light faded from his eyes. Taran stood there for a long time. Then he turned and left the citadel. He walked alone through the ruins of paradise. Smoke strangled the sky. The air stank of burning stone and flesh. The screams that reached him were sharp and human. Children cried. Buildings collapsed. The dream was over. Taran kept walking. Not proud. Not triumphant. Just walking. The ash clung to his boots. And behind him, the fire raged.